we have our 4 strips sewn together. And as I said before, if you'll make sure that your end that is even is always sewn first so that you have one basically squared in, you get that extra cut out of this. So we're going to try to make the best use of our material we can. I'm going to take my big square, and you line up one of the lines with the center line down the middle of the strips between the purple and the gold, or the blue and the purple, whichever one you want to do. But you want to make sure that this first cut squares it up. And it's an awkward cut. If you have a small table like this at home and you want to walk around on the other side, that's the best way to do it. So I'm going to make this one cut. Just pull that out of the way. I have a squared edge. Now, this should be 8.5 inches wide, and I did a good job because it's 8.5 inches wide. Now, I want to come 8.5 this way and 8.5 this way. If the width across your strips winds up a little bit less than 8.5, if you iron it out like this, and then you measure from one side to the other, and it's just shy of 8.5, just cut all your squares that same width, and then everything will still be squared up. You don't have to say, well, I've ruined this whole set of strips. Just measure and see what they are. If they're 8.5, fine. If they're a little bit shy, just cut them a little bit shy. As long as you wind up with squares, you're doing good. So we're going to go 8.5 this way and 8.5 this way. There's our first cut. So there's our block. I'm going to slide it down this way. And just keep going. I should get 5 out of this if I've measured and cut right. And every now and then, no matter how good you are, you're going to mess up a cut. So don't get all upset over it. You can do another square. 2. Make sure your top and your side and your bottom line up. 3. Go 8.5 and 8.5. 4. And on your last one, 8.5. And that's why we put all the even ends together. So we have 5 blocks now. We need to do this until we have 30 blocks, and then we will assemble the quilt top and start with our borders. Finally, we have all of our blocks cut. Now we're going to go to the big wall and put them up on the flannel board so we'll know what to sew to what. Now comes the fun part. We have all of our blocks and we have our flannel board assembled. We're going to have some fun and put this quilt together and see how it looks. Okay, our quilt is up on the flannel board. Now all we have to do is take the blocks in the position they're in, sew them together, these 2 together, these 2 together, then these 2 together, and then that one. We'll have the top row sewn together. When we do that, we want to press all of our seams toward the solid piece. You have 4 seams coming this way and a solid piece. 4 seams and a solid piece. You want to press these seams toward the solid piece because that's where they automatically want to go. When we get ready to sew this row to this row to this row, we'll have a little bit of different way to handle it. But right now, we're ready to sew. Okay, now it's time to sew our blocks together. We're going to sew them row at a time. We're going to take these 2 and fold them over on each other. And this one is folded over here, and then sew those together. Then we'll come back and sew these two together here, and then add this one on the end, and we'll have our first row done. Now when we press the seams, we're going to press the seams toward this solid piece. You've got 3 seams coming here. You want to press it toward the solid because that's the way it wants to go. So we're going to get busy sewing. Now when we sew these together, we want to sew them in such a way that our seams are on the top and angled down on this one. You have the solid piece on the back. We won't have to fight our seams that way and make sure they're going the same way. Get your top corners together. Put your presser foot down. Hold your thread so they will not get jumbled up under there. And when you start sewing, just enough to catch it, reach down to the bottom and put those 2 corners together. Then when you sew, you just put a little tension on it and you don't have to pin. Okay, here are our first 2 blocks, the second set of 2. Now, according to our pattern, they will go this way. So I'm going to flip this one here. Now this time, I'm going to sew it with the solid piece on top, because the seams on the back are already angled down, and that's how you want them to be. The machine will automatically feed them through that way. So we want to get them started, hold our thread. Just after you get your needle in, even these bottom corners up, sew them, and if you need to even as you go, do so. Okay, I've gotten our last row together. Now it's time to put this in place and sew the rows together from top to bottom, and we'll have the center of our quilt finished. I've turned the top row down onto the second row, and I have them here. We want to match up this corner, and then your seams will automatically, because of the way we press them, they will go in opposite directions between the blocks. You want to finger work those together, and they will nudge into each other so that when you sew across them, you should not need any pins. Just be very careful as you go to start on this end, and then get these in place and put your fingers here and put a little bit of tension, and that should keep everything in line. Now as we connect each of the rows, we sew down those seams, and then we're going to press. We want to press the rows to set the seam. Then we're going to open it out and press it open the length of the seam. But we have one more step before we're finished, because these seams are not ending up at a solid piece like the others were. So we're going to take it now and turn it over, and we're going to press these seams open. So now that we've set the seam, we're going to open it up. Just take our time and press these seams open. And I take the nose, the little point of the iron, and open it up, and then set the iron down on it. And just let that steam do its work.